Let's go live now. Anthony Albanese speaking in Sydney at a news conference.
Treats the public piggy bank just like its own private pork barrel. We've seen a $100 million fund used to pork barrel marginal electorates, and that, of course, we know also there's a second fund of $150 million that was used for exactly the same thing. Now, Scott Morrison said 16 times, including in the Parliament, that all projects were eligible. We know, in fact, from the National Audit Office itself, that 43% of the funds used in this scheme were in fact not eligible. The Prime Minister is loose with the truth. Scott Morrison thinks that marketing and spin will solve every problem and that marketing is more important than telling the public the truth. Well, the truth is that they use taxpayers' funds as if it was the funds of the Liberal and National parties, and that has been exposed. 43% of funding to ineligible projects, in spite of the fact that Scott Morrison on 16 times said that there were no ineligible projects funded. He has misled the Australian people. He's also misled the Parliament yet again, and he will have to correct the record when Parliament resumes in a week's time. This is a scandal of massive proportions, because what we have here is not just ineligible projects funded, we've also got volunteers in community sporting-based organisations spending hundreds and hundreds of hours putting forward submissions to a scheme that they thought would be funded on the basis of merit, and we now know was all about politics. And we also heard evidence that literally there were dozens of emails and interactions between the Prime Minister's office directly and Bridget McKenzie's office. No wonder it took them so long to sack Bridget McKenzie, because quite clearly Scott Morrison was in this right up to his neck. Happy to take questions.
So, is it not just a technicality that the projects were ineligible, given they were at one stage eligible according to Sports Australia?
No, they were ineligible projects. What we have here is a rorting of the scheme. And we have the Prime Minister, who has said on a number of occasions that every project was eligible. We know, of course, that was an absurd analogy and spin to try and get around the fact that there was political decision-making, not decision-making based upon merit. I'm eligible to play Davis Cup for Australia. I play for Marrickville Lawn Tennis Club down the road here. I'm in Division 2, Grade 5. So chances are there's probably tens of thousands of players who are better suited to play Davis Cup rather than me. It doesn't mean I'm not eligible. So it was always spin from the government. What we have here is that even their spin wasn't true. Scott Morrison is consistently loose with the truth. He says things that just aren't true. When confronted with questions, he comes up with statements like it's in the bubble, or that is just an editorial, or other spin to avoid providing Australians with the truth. The truth is that this government is arrogant and out of touch, and this program was completely rorted for political ends.
Would Labor like to see the process change?
Well, there wasn't a process here except for a minister and the Prime Minister's office deciding on the basis of colour-coded versions, of which we now know there were dozens of colour-coded documents not based upon merit. It wasn't a 1 to 10 scale of merit, because we know that Sports Australia did that. What they did was throw merit out and just make decisions based upon politics. And of course it should change. It is, frankly, just a complete rort. It's an abuse of taxpayers' funds. It's an abuse of the process. It's an insult to Sports Australia. It's an abrogation of the requirements that are there under the legislation.
Opposition Leader, do you support the government's decision to extend the travel ban for coronavirus?
Look, I think that what we should do here is just follow medical advice. We met with the Chief Medical Officer this week. If the government is following that advice, then we don't think that this should be a partisan issue. Australians have to be kept safe.
What do you make of China's criticism of the Australian government?
Well, Australia has to defend our own national interest and the safety of Australian citizens. So we should be following medical advice. Neither myself or Scott Morrison, certainly Peter Dutton isn't a qualified doctor, and what we should do is listen to that advice and follow it. The first priority has to be keeping people safe.
What financial assistance would you like the federal government to provide for businesses hit by the coronavirus?
Well, that is a matter for decisions to be made. Clearly, we don't know what the full impact will be here. Clearly, there'll be a need to give assistance, particularly to the tourism sector. The government's priority should be, at this point in time, what we know is that for a long period of time, businesses have been impacted over the December and January period by the bushfires. The fact is there are a range of businesses that are crying out for support because they rely upon that period in order to fund their entire financial stability of their business. And I think Andrew Constance, the Liberal Party member for Bega, has made some very clear statements about that, and I agree with Andrew Constance.
So do you think mainly the tourism sector needs support, or other sectors also need government support?
Look, that'll be a matter for assessment. The priority here at this point in time is to provide assistance in terms of making the right decisions based upon the health advice.
Opposition leader, can you say why you've been called to give evidence in the trial against Eddie Obeid and Ian McDonald?
Well, as you know the answer to that, which is something's before the courts.
So what information do you think?
Something's before the courts.
And you're not concerned that...
Something's before the courts. Thank you.
Mr Albanese, just one thing on the sports short subject.
Opposition leader Anthony Albanese speaking there in Sydney.
It looks like he's back, actually. Shall we?
So we see every day in the spin that we get from it.
Look, we need a National Integrity Commission. The government promised us one in 2018. Quite clearly, a National Integrity Commission would be able to get right into this issue. This is a complete rort. Everyone knows it is. Documents floating around colour-coded to determine projects in spite of the fact that Sports Australia had looked at the merit of projects, and all of that was just ignored. The Angus Taylor affair. How is it that Angus Taylor can't answer the simple question of where the fraudulent document that was given to the Daily Telegraph about Clover Moore and her fellow councillors' alleged travel, that came from somewhere. It didn't come from the City of Sydney website. Why is it that someone can't just ask Angus Taylor the question? Now, if Scott Morrison had integrity, he would ask Angus Taylor that question, and frankly, the public are entitled to know that question. We do need a National Integrity Commission. It should be introduced as a matter of urgency. The public don't have confidence in our politics at the moment, and it would go a long way, I think, to ensuring that there was integrity in our system. Thank you.